we want to get a report from everybody first about what they did today. And see, when you're in here full time, you stay really, really, really busy. There's plenty to do. Has anybody been complaining because they had nothing to do? You know, Dustin's been doing an engine swap. He been busting his fanny on that thing and all that stuff and everything. And for some reason, his help keeps wandering off. You know what I mean? Dustin's over here. Dustin's staying on task, and he wanders off.
Where is John?
They have a tendency to evaporate about this time of day. For some reason, like they were made out of smoke. Poof, you know. Now, we'll tell you, they typically come in early, you know. Jeff Coate, he came in you were here early today, 7 o'clock or something?
I was here between 7:30 and 8 o'clock.
Yeah, he got here early. And then Adams, he had a job to do, so Brian, he comes popping in here at gosh, you were here at, you were here earlier. I think you came in right before he did. And he jumped right on his radiator and slammed it right in there. Moody was plumb disillusioned because he came in and his radiator not only had been pulled out, but a new one had been put back in, you know. Anyway, that's just funny.
That's the other thing I did today too, was flush your radiator.
Yeah, the radiator flush, okay. Okay, so number 1, an engine repair 1, test 1. A spark ignition fuel injected engine requires 6 basic systems. Is that true or is that false? That is true. Second rate amateur. Okay, during the compression stroke, the piston moves down in the cylinder and the intake valve is open. True or false? What's going on in the compression stroke? Huh? Sir? And the valves have to be closed. If they're not closed, you're not going to compress anything, right? Under what circumstances would the valves be open if it's going up on the compression stroke? If it's jump time, or it's got a bent valve, huh?
Do I need one of these?
No, you're just sitting in on the test.
Okay.
Yeah. The connecting rod connects the crankshaft to the camshaft. True or false? Don't play dumb with me. The connecting rod. The connecting rod.
No, sir.
Does this connect the crankshaft to the camshaft? No. All right. Spark ignition engine and a compression ignition engine differ in the type of fuel they use. What is a compression ignition engine? What fires on compression? What does a Humvee have in it? A diesel, right? You got it. You squeeze that air to 450 pounds, it's 900 degrees, you shoot some juice in there, it's going to light off. Got me? Glow plugs are only there so that whenever the engine is cold, the cold metal won't use up the heat that's being, you know, helps it so it'll fire up to start with, but the glow plugs don't keep it running. They just start it. The air induction system keeps the engine at a safe and efficient operating temperature. Wait a minute, number 5, that is absolutely false. The air induction system doesn't do that. It's basically letting air in so that it can process it in the combustion chamber. A piston stroke takes place when the piston moves from top dead center to bottom dead center, or from bottom dead center to top dead center. Is that true or false? All right. This is dead center.
Right.
Top. Okay, when it comes down, it does that. And then it goes to dead center again. It comes up and it does that. Okay, so 1 stroke, 2 stroke, 3. And so how many strokes are there total
In one cylinder?
in one cycle of a cylinder?
So one cylinder's 360.
4 strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so what's the first stroke? 1. What stroke is that? The valves are open, or the intake valve is open. Is there ever a time when both the intake and the exhaust valves are open at the same time? Yes. That's called overlap. Just as the exhaust valve is beginning to close, before it completely closes, the intake valve typically opens a little, and that's when the piston's at the top, and it purges the rest of that burned exhaust out of there. You don't do that, you'll have a rough idle because you won't have good combustion and all that stuff. Okay, just live it, learn it, breathe it. Okay, number 6, that one's going to be true. Number 7, in a compression ignition engine, the piston compresses the air and fuel mixture until the spark at the spark plug ignites it. Absolutely false. If it's compression ignition, It's going to be a diesel and it won't have a spark plug. Unless it's like my dad's old sawmill engine that he did, it starts on gas and runs on diesel. Which is, that's ancient history, so you don't see that anymore. Let's see, during the intake stroke of a 4-stroke engine, a piston moves up in the cylinder. That's false. It goes down, right? During the exhaust stroke of a 4-stroke engine, the piston forces the burn gases out through the open exhaust port. That's exhaust stroke, yep, when it goes up. You know what's funny? I would take a 4-cylinder engine when I used to do engine principles, one of my exams, and I would say, I'd have the engine there and no pan, no valve cover, timing belt was exposed, it was on the engine stand, and I would say, and you may have heard me tell this story before, Melissa, I would say, I want you, tell the student, whoever it was, and this would be an exam, I would say, I want you to put this thing on top dead center exhaust stroke cylinder number 4.
You actually made me do that.
And so what they would do was they would turn that engine through, watching those valves and all that, and then I'd say, okay, now, then they'd show me, and if it was in the right place, I'd say, now I want you to put it on top dead center compression stroke cylinder number 1. And they would turn it through and all this kind of stuff again, and they would huff and puff, and they'd get it like they wanted it to be, and I'd say, okay, you got it in the right place both times. They said, well, that means I made a good grade? I said, no, you made a 70. What? I thought you said I did it. So you didn't do it right. When I told you to put it on top dead center exhaust stroke on cylinder number 4, all you had to do was line the timing marks up. And then when I told you to put it on top dead center compression stroke cylinder number 1, all you had to do is say it's already there. So they're working too hard. See what I mean? Got to be smart enough that you don't work hard. All right. If not tightly sealed, the piston clearance allows some of the compressed air fuel mixture to leak past the pistons. This is called,
Valve overload.
please,
Displacement.
you're just stirring up trouble. That's what you're doing. What's the right answer? What do you call it? Blowby. What do you do? How do you deal with blowby? How do our engines deal with blowby? All engines have blowby. Some have more than others, but all of them have it. So how do we deal with it? If we just seal the crankcase up tight, it's going to blow all the seals, isn't it? Because it's going to build pressure up.
Is it that little ring around it?
Try the PCV valve. The PCV valve is a vacuum draw on the crankcase, and it actually pulls air in from the crankcase breather, and it's basically always purging that blow-by out, and it's running it through the mix. Is there somebody out in the shop?
I say Madden.
Huh?
Madden.
Who's?
Madden.
Oh, Madden's out there? Go tell Madden to get in here. All right.
Who's Madden?
All right.
Madden's in the red
Yeah, I'll
room.
show you.
Yeah. Tell Madden, get in here. He can join us. Okay. Let's see.
Kathy!
There's Kathy. It's so nice to see you, Kathy. Hey, you have the core. Where's Madden? Do you have
You
the,
already gave it to me.
well, he was really good. He was Johnny on the spot, wasn't he?
About time you got to school.
I know.
She's 2 hours late.
I
All
am
right, let me
not.
see here. All right, Quincy. Look at there. Quincy's gone too. Interesting. All right, put that.
Quincy
He
has
already
to go
returned to
take-
court.
Quincy had to go to the hospital with lots of
Really?
doctors.
I didn't know that. Sorry. He didn't tell me nothing about
At
it.
least I think that's what I went.
Second rate amateur. All right, let me see. That's good. Put those where they go. Come in here, Madden. Have a seat. All right. Did you see me drop my ball? If that had been a glass, it would have made a mess on the floor. Okay. Yeah, the intake valves, exhaust valves, and combustion chamber are all located in the what? The intake valves, exhaust valves, and combustion chamber are all located in the what? Cylinder head. You guys knew that. The measure of how much of the air-fuel mixture is compressed during the compression stroke is the, if you got the distance above the piston, between the piston and the head, if it's 8 times as big when the piston's at bottom dead center as it is when it's at top dead center, what does that mean? What would you call that? I'd call that an 8-to-1 compression ratio. Madden, don't play dumb with me. Okay, you knew the answer to that question.
Me and him were whispering it
All
over.
right, y'all are whispering, weren't you? Everybody's afraid they're going to get the wrong answer or something?
No?
I went to that General Motors school in 1981, and the instructor was a woman, and there was 12 big mechanics in there, and every one of them was scared to answer a question because they're afraid to be wrong, and they'd feel silly.
I've been answering almost all of them.
Yeah, I know how that works. All right. But anyway, let's see. The cylinders, piston, and crankshaft are all located in what? What did you take off of that engine stand over there?
Me?
Yeah,
Engine block?
engine block. What was in that engine block?
What was it?
Yeah, cylinders, pistons, crankshaft.
I don't think all that stuff was on there.
I know, but that's where it's located ordinarily. You were just really being a wooden-headed literalist, weren't you?
Hey,
There were some pistons that were missing out of that
There were
thing.
only 2 pistons in there.
Yeah. I saw this guy build an engine one time, and he managed to put one of the pistons in there with no rings on it. That went over like a lead balloon. I mean, it had no compression on that one cylinder, and we pulled it out. It was just empty lands there, you know, really neat.
Did it eat the wall
Huh?
up? Did it eat the center wall up?
No, it didn't hurt anything because it really just kind of zimming up down there. Okay, the air filter and the throttle body are parts of the what?
Very nice.
Seat reduction.
Air induction system. The header pipe, catalytic converter, and muffler are parts of the.
Exhaust.
Duh. That's not too hard, is it? See, some of this stuff, it starts simple and gets harder, so be aware of that. You're not going to be able to wing all of them, right? Okay. Engine repair, test 2. We're going to go on to test 2 without even taking a breather here. Convection heat transfer occurs when heat is transferred from one object to another by direct contact.
Pretty sure
That's not true. What 3 ways are heat transferred?
Conduction, convection, and radiation.
Okay, so define, tell him what it is, so he can text it to whoever he's texting. Okay, conduction,
Conduction is from one object, transfers heat from one object to another.
do they have to be touching?
I believe so.
That's right. Keep going.
Radiation is bad stuff.
Not like that. The sun,
No, I know.
yeah.
It's, I think radiation is through
The sun.
waves. Ultraviolet, is it ultra? Or
Yeah, basically when something shines and you feel the heat, that's what that
Or,
basically
yeah,
is, yeah.
waves.
Don't overthink this, you know what I'm
Well,
saying?
I was trying to recall what I had from physical science 2 last semester.
Okay, and keep going.
And then convection is, what is convection?
A kind of oven, right?
I guess you could say that. I can't remember what convection is.
Yeah. Convection is whenever heat is absorbed and carried somewhere else. Like, how would you put that in an engine? Okay, so what you were dealing with today, radiators. We were running out our ears with radiators today. You did a cooling system flush at the shop you were working at. Okay, so here we've got all of this going on. Well, not radiation, but we do have conduction is whenever the heat is translated into these flues from the coolant. It actually is absorbed as the coolant makes contact with the cylinder head and the engine and the cylinders. And then it's carried through into the radiator, and it's actually transferring that heat to the air that's blowing through there. So it's conveying the heat from the engine into the radiator, and then it's being carried out of there by the air coming through. That make sense? You understand the way that heat moves, because that's the other thing we talk about in heat and AC. So number 2 is the false because conduction, 1 and 2 are false. Convection heat transfer occurs when heat's transferred from one. No, that's actually conduction. And then if an object is heated as a result of heat in the surrounding area, that's convection. It's basically heat's being conveyed, right? Okay, number 3, most radiators are the downflow type.
False.
They're usually cross-flow. Has anybody seen a downflow radiator lately?
Not lately.
I have,
What?
on that PT Cruiser.
Yeah.
The tanks are on the top and the bottom, remember? Right? The tanks are on the top and the bottom, and it's a downflow. And on most of them, though, it goes crossways. Like on the one that you put in. You notice how the tanks are on the end and it flows this way? That's right. That's how it works. Got me? Yours didn't have a radiator cap on it, did it?
No. Because remember you had it in that box last.
I
Yeah.
realized y'all came in here.
You're 3 hours late.
We thought you evaporated.
Yeah.
I was here.
So he disappeared. He vanished without a trace. He went up like smoke. All that.
That's why they call me Houdini.
Uh,
We know that.
They call him Udini. All right. All right. So what we're going to do here, a fan drive clutch is controlled by the temperature of the air moving through the radiator.
False.
Excuse me? Where'd it come from? This.
It's duct tape.
That's true.
This is a fan drive clutch. What's the purpose of that? Why do we have this on there? Why don't we just hook the fan directly to the water pump pulley and let it be done with it? I mean, that's the way that Cadillac's made out there, that 42-year-old Cadillac. What do you think? See how this one here?
Looks like a big old heat sink.
All right, now what's that right there in the middle? That is a bimetal strip.
That's not right.
All right, as really hot air, as hot air starts coming through here, and it changes the shape of this bimetal strip, it actually changes some, a lot of them have a spiral spring that's bimetal, and the valving is changed on the inside of this so that this viscous coupling, but it gets harder to turn. So the speed of this thing more closely follows the speed of the water pump pulley. Now, why don't we just let it spin full speed all the time?
You think that'll run your car too cool?
Well, that's not the biggest reason. Have you ever seen, Madden, have you ever seen one of these that was locked up? You ever seen one that's locked up? You know, what's the symptoms? What makes the customer come and say, and leads you to find a locked up fan clutch? They're gonna notice something. When they're driving it, they're gonna notice that the darn thing is really, really noisy, and it doesn't have nearly as much power, because that fan blade is being spun at the same speed as the water pump pulley, and it's actually cutting the air all the time, and it's robbing them a bunch of their power. So this basically helps the car have better fuel economy, and it only uses a fan when it really needs it. But as we go on, the Crown Victoria we got out there doesn't even have a fan like this. It's actually got one that's an electric fan, and the water pump pulley's just got bolts on it. Now you see that one up there with the wires coming off of it? It looks similar to this. That one there is operated by the PCM. The PCM decides how much that viscous coupling is going to restrict the movement of this and how fast this fan is going to spin. And you can actually go in there with your scan tool and you can change it under your active command mode if you got a two-way talking scan tool. And it's really important to be able to troubleshoot one of those too. We changed that one off of a Trailblazer. Got it? All right. I just wanted to cover that because I needed to do this while I was thinking about it. And if anybody in here is starting to turn into a skeleton, get used to it, because you're going to sit and listen to me talk a little bit. All right, I'm almost through though. Let me see. When the engine is cold, the closed thermostat valve restricts the flow of coolant from the engine.
Isn't that false? Isn't it supposed to be from the radiator?
That's actually true, but basically it's coming from the engine to the radiator through the thermostat. Why is a thermostat there? Why do we even need a thermostat?
First of all, when you crank it up in the morning, so like when it's cold, it can have time to heat up and not let the water sit there constantly, and the coolness there and circulate through the engine.
Listen to him. He knows what he's talking about, doesn't he? You knew that, didn't you? What happens if your thermostat's bad, if it's open all the time, comes apart? What's your symptom?
I have no idea.
You ain't got no heater. It runs too cold, usually.
And that's when it gets
Some of these people will say, if you take the thermostat out of an engine, it'll run too hot. Which 99.9% of the time, that statement is malarkey. But some people think they're smarter than everybody else because they knew of one vehicle that did that, and they think they're all like that.
A lot of times if you can't afford a thermostat and it's hot like it is out here, you can actually take the thermostat out and let it run.
Yeah, if you can't afford a thermostat, you're hurting because they're only about $5 from the park shop. You know, they don't cost very much, if it's hard to get to them. All right, the coolant that has a smaller effective temperature range but is less toxic is a 50-50 mixture of propylene glycol and water. That's true. Do any of you guys ever drink any propylene glycol? What? What is it?
Whenever I had coolant going in my mouth.
Does anybody ever use this Mio stuff that you sweeten your water with?
God,
Yeah.
no.
It's propylene glycol.
awesome, so I'm gonna be antifreeze.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's propylene glycol. It's the same stuff that's in that orange antifreeze. Is that scary or what?
That's not scary.
Huh?
That's scary.
It shouldn't be scary. You know why? Because it ain't poison. Ethylene glycol is, but propylene glycol is not. So that's why if your dog happens to drink a pan full of propylene glycol, they're less likely to have kidney failure. You know what I mean? Than they are if they drink ethylene glycol. Because it's all.
You should, give your dog.
I was worried when I saw that on back, and I looked it up. If you look it up on the internet, it says, well, nobody can really point to anything that's harmful about propylene glycol. I mean, you can't find anybody, any research that even says it hurts you, but it tastes really good. So I put it in my my peach tea that I drink. So I drink it all the
What
time.
about coolant?
Yeah, and I shall not surely die, at least not tomorrow, hopefully. All right, let's go here. Pressure tester is a tool that can be used to determine leaks in the coolant system as well as to test a pressure cap. That's true. When's the last time you used a pressure tester?
The last time I used one, Moody touched it and shot coolant everywhere.
Did you have a good?
Pressure tester does not get along very
Neither do
well.
I.
Yeah.
Moody and a pressure tester don't get along
Yeah,
very
you
well?
did it to me once too.
So Moody wets you down pretty good with coolant using a pressure tester.
Especially on.
Actually, yeah, it was you. I did it too, wasn't it?
Don't you just love? Don't you just love it when that stuff splatters all over your shirt, goes down your shirt, and it wets your whole shirt, and it's just gummy, and it's just
Yeah,
makes you want to go
sticky.
take a shower right then, you
You
know?
ever ingest it?
Why is it that when you dip your hand in antifreeze or brake fluid, your hand feels warm? You know, but if you dip it in alcohol or lacquer thinner, it feels cold, because they're all liquids.
It's burning you.
Nope,
Different chemicals.
it ain't burning you. Don't start with me, Joe. And we're talking just out of the bottle, off the shelf. You pour brake fluid on your hand, you pour antifreeze on your hand, it's gonna feel warm.
It was so different.
You pour water on your hand, it kind of feels neutral. You pour alcohol on your hand, it feels cold. You pour gas on your hand, it feels cold. You pour diesel on your hand, it feels warm. It's got to do with the boiling point and the freezing point. If it's got a boiling point is kind of low, you know, if it's got a high boiling point, it's gonna make your hand feel warm. If it's got a low boiling point, it's gonna make it feel cold. I can put some refrigerant, you know, or some of this crud that comes in the air cans. I can put some of that in a styrofoam coffee cup. I can hold it upside down and make liquid come out. And you can put it in a styrofoam coffee cup and it will be liquid. Now don't sit it down somewhere because somebody might drink it. You know what I'm saying? But you can load that stuff there in a styrofoam coffee cup. It'll stay liquid. But if you pour it on any surface in here, it's going to boil like you poured it on a hot skillet. But the R factor of that styrofoam, you know, that's amazing to see that happen, you know. All right, let me see. Pyrometer is used to test the freezing point of coolants. A or B?
False. No, that one is true.
What is the pyrometer used for?
Checking
Didn't
pipe
it have the
fire.
water?
What is the pyrometer? What now?
It says pyro in the name, so it has to do with fire.
Heat, basically. You know, it's basically test heat. An infrared pyrometer is a contact type, but you don't touch anything with an infrared
What was the
pyrometer, so you know
answer
that
to
was
eight?
false. Huh?
What was the answer to 8?
The answer to 8 was basically, what do you think? That's false, right? It doesn't measure to determine the freezing point of coolants by any means. But it basically is, you're typically going to just measure the temperature of something by touching it or by pointing it at it if it's a pyrometer. Infrared pyrometer, you just point it. A relief valve that's stuck open will cause high oil pressure.
True.
False. Why do you have oil pressure anyway? Does the oil pump produce pressure? Does the oil pump produce pressure? Not unless the relief valve has a good strong spring and is working right. Because the oil pump has got to squeeze that spring before it can get up out of the exhaust port. And if the amount of pressure it has to apply to squeeze that spring is what determines the amount of oil pressure is there. Now you can actually lose the oil pressure if you got a leak somewhere. But the long and the short of it is the oil pump does not produce pressure unless there is a relief valve to restrict it. Okay, we've got 5 more questions left, and then you guys can close the shop and go home because it's right at the end of the day. Primary heat transfer device for the engine is the what? Radiator. This is not a trick question. If the thermostat sticks closed, what will happen then?
Overheat.
It will overheat, but most thermostats nowadays stick open. Now, you know, you guys know about how to check a thermostat to make sure it's working right, okay? What do? You gotta spill water everywhere, huh?
Take it out and shake it.
Take it out, put it in a pan of water, heat the pan of water with a thermometer in it. When it hits about 196, which is what most of them are set for, and that thermostat will open up. If it doesn't open up and it goes on up there and you got boiling water and the thermostat's still closed, it's sticking closed and you found the reason for your overheating. That's the most common reason you would do that. Now, there's no point in checking it if you're pulling the thermostat out and you're checking to see if that's the reason the engine's running too cold, then there's not any point in that. Since you got a thermostat out, you may as well go put one in there anyway. But if you find out it didn't open when you boil in the water, you'll know that was the reason for your overheating.
We've actually learned a trick I learned from a guy over in Luverne.
Yeah?
When the engine he lets it warm up, he takes the radiator cap out, he sticks the water hose on the radiator. And he gets inside, and if it starts cooling down like it's supposed to,
Uh-huh.
because that water in there is cold, then he knows that the thermostat is actually working properly.
Yeah, that's smart because it's circulating.
Right,
Yeah.
instead of having to take it out.
Not a bad idea. There's all kinds of people. People are smart. If you understand how something works, they'll come up with ways to make things happen, you know, and all that. If you put a thermostat in backwards, what happens?
Put it in that, let's just.
Overheats. Because that wax pellet can't open it. All right. All right. To test the thermostat, you use what? Huh? No, it's scan tool.
See, I was thinking that, and then you said something about putting it in.
How can you check a thermostat with a scan tool?
Plug it in and go to it.
It'll let you know
Excuse
whether
me? You're gonna go check thermostat. Okay.
It'll let you know whether it's open.
What is it, electronic or what, huh?
Yes.
What is it? Tell me about it.
About the temperature. If the temperature goes to at least 101, no, not 120, about 210, and then drops to 190, you know it opens.
She's smart. What you're doing is you're watching the engine coolant temperature, and it goes up and it goes up above 200, then all of a sudden you see it drop to about 190 and then climb again. You know the thermostat's opening and closing because it's going to bounce back and forth between those two. Now the temperature that's stamped on the thermostat, when you see one that's got a temperature stamp on it, what does that temperature mean? If it says 194, what does that mean?
Temperature that it opens up
That's
at.
when it starts to open. It begins to open at 194. It gets wider as it gets hotter than that. Okay, servicing the cooling system may involve doing what?
All the above.
Draining it, bleeding it, reverse flushing the system. And once again, I'm gonna hammer on this over and over again. Everybody should know in here that filling a cooling system is not like pouring water in a bucket. Some of these vehicles, the foreign cars that I've heard of talking about at the MAX convention, when you try to pour coolant in the radiator, you won't get all the air out of it because the engine block's a little higher in the radiator. So if the engine block's higher in the radiator and there aren't any bleeders, how do you get the air out of it?
Yeah, Ethan told me that too.
You got to jack the front of the car up so high that the radiator is higher than the engine, and then fill it up that way. And you don't hardly ever have to do that, but if you've got one that one car that we worked on, and it was one, and I think the one that one of the cars that Garrett put an engine in, and I was thinking it was a Cavalier or something. Popped an engine in it, and it talked about bleeder screws in the shop manual. Open the bleeder screws when you're filling the coolant system. There weren't any bleeder screws on that engine. There was not any bleeder screws.
Was that the Cavalier?
I think it was. I mean, I could be wrong. It was one. We've put so many engines in here, I can't remember. But
He put a few of them in.
we change out engines in a big way all the time. Okay, and right now, the engine swapper is Mr. Reeves over there. And he's really been digging in his heels in on that one. The internal passages for coolant in the engine block and cylinder head are critical for proper engine cooling, and they're called what?
Water jackets.
Now, if you look at a head gasket, listen to this on a closing note. If you look at a head gasket, the passage, the water passage, where the coolant goes from the block into the cylinder head, if you just looked at those passages, they're big. I mean, they may be just triangular looking big passages. You won't have a passage in that head gasket that same size. It's going to be smaller. It's going to have a little hole in there. Does anybody know why it's got a little hole instead of a hole the same size? Because the water needs to go through that cylinder head slow enough to where it can gather plenty of heat. All right. Now, how many of you know that if you don't tighten a spark plug down all the way, it's so that either the gasket or that bevel seat is touching the bottom of the spark plug, it's going to overheat the spark plug like it did this one. That spark plug was in that car 2 days, and it did that. The boy that put it in cross-threaded it, put it down in there, and when it stopped, he says, well, I can't really see what's going on down in there, and I know that it's not in all the way, but maybe it'll be all right. So he just didn't say anything about it. And then she came back, and it was skipping, and it was just really big time burned up and scorched. You got me? It was scorched and burned up. Look at that. I wonder if I can make that focus on that by getting my face out of the picture. See that? It was burned up and scorched. It was terrible. And so we had to fix the threads in the head and all that kind of stuff. But the long and short of it is, always make sure when you're putting spark plugs in one, especially if they're down in a hole, take a piece of hose, put it on there. Don't just throw it down in the hole because you'll ding the first thread. Then you'll go about 3 or 4 turns and it'll stop. And you'll say, well, I don't know what to do now, but I think I'll just let it alone. Maybe it'll be all right. And then boom, it blows them out of there. It happens so many times and all that. Are you watching the clock? Okay. You see him looking at the clock? I think we need to stay in here another 15 minutes, don't we? All right. Let's look at that clock. Who keeps looking at the clock? Look at the clock. That clock is fast, isn't it? All right. All right, we're gonna go and, tomorrow, we're gonna work hard, except you're gonna be all day tomorrow over there, and then Thursday you'll be all day here. So Thursday, then you'll be having to work hard here. All right.